Good morning, Jewish Belonging Summit. Good morning. Good to be here with you. 'Cause your people are my people. Your people are mine. Let's remind each other, your people are my people. You're divine, my divine. So 2 Jews, 3 opinions. A Jew discovered after being lost and alone on an island is asked, why 2 synagogues? And they respond by saying, this is the one I go to, and this is the one that I would never step foot in. 2 congregants are having a heated argument about a point of Jewish law, and they go to decide to ask the rabbi, who's right? So the first presents their case passionately and clearly, and the rabbi says, yeah, you're right. And then the second makes their argument, and it's just as compelling. And the rabbi listens carefully and says, you're right. And then someone who's watching this conversation go down says, come on, rabbi. You just told them both that they're right. And to that, the rabbi says, you're right too. And to think, how many jokes are there about this distinct quality of the Jewish people to be stiff-necked and stubborn with our views and opinions while also holding multiple truths? I guess it depends who you ask. And I grew up knowing that American Jewish life didn't work for everybody. I grew up knowing that America did not work for everybody. As a descendant of those who fought in the American Revolutionary War, sons and daughters of the American Revolution, as a survivor and a descendant of those who were legally bound in chattel slavery in this country. My blood is Dutch and Irish. My bones are African and Eastern European. And I'm a black Jew with white skin. I'm the white sheep of my family, I guess. And in other ways, being this undercover brother, sometimes my life feels like belonging across difference. As someone who lives on this bridge connecting an archipelago of identities, the questions for me at the heart of this plenary on belonging across difference are ones that I've carried for most of my life. What is the cost of ignoring the differences in our community? How do we engage with someone when I think it's a hurricane and they think it's sunny outside? Where would we be as a Jewish community if we did not learn to lean into the differences? Or better yet, would we be a people if we did not learn to lean into our differences? If we did not learn about the first children of Cain and Abel, from Abraham and Lot, from Rebekah and Isaac, Jacob and Laban, Rachel and Leah, Joseph and his brothers, and the list goes on. And so this word machloket, or argument, often translated as dispute or debate, comes from the root word chelek, meaning a portion or to have a part. It implies fragmentation, yes, but it is also about sacred differentiation. When we engage in machloket, we are not just arguing, we are naming the different pieces of truth that exist and offering them up to build something larger than any one of us can do alone. Belonging across difference means embracing a community that does not flatten difference, but honors it as holy. It means that when someone says, I'm here and this is my story, we listen not with suspicion and judgment, but with curiosity and reverence. Because that story, that portion of their lived Torah, of each of our lived Torah, is a part of the collective story of our people. And as I be real with you, friends, today's conversation around identity, particularly in the Jewish world, can feel like an unsupervised middle school lunchroom. Food is flung, ideologies feel justified, and it's not just America that's fractured today. American Jews have never been more together and also divided all at once. And many of us find ourselves unsure of whose America and whose Judaism we are characters in. And so you might wonder why many of us have this custom during these days to not listen to live music. Some don't shave or get haircuts. And it goes back to a story from Rabbi Akiva in the Talmud. He had 12,000 pairs of students who perished at the same time because they did not treat each other with respect. Shelo nahagu kavod zeh b'zeh. And according to our tradition, during this period between Passover and Shavuot, it's a time of mourning because of this. And so the Talmud in Yevamos says, they did not die because of theological heresy or criminal wrongdoing, but rather because they failed at derech eretz, basic respect and dignity, and how they treated one another. This teaches us something radical. A community of Torah, even one as learned as Rabbi Akiva's students, cannot endure without mutual respect. In a context of the summit on Jewish belonging, this teaching reminds us even communities striving for these highest ideals of Torah, justice, equity, and healing, the way we speak to each other, regard each other, make space for each other, matters deeply. This idea of shelo nahagu kavod zeh b'zeh, when we can't see that dignity within one another, when our impulses get the best of us and we attack in a certain way, when we don't show respect. Because without kavod, without dignity and respect, is there really community? And without respect, could we possibly have belonging? And so I say to you this morning, from the depths of my heart as we gather today, may this conversation that's about to take place be etched into our minds as a memory, not in pencil, not in parentheses, but in ink made of love and loving those who are different than us. Although there are boundaries to inclusion, and we need to ensure our ideas and ideologies are not causing harm, belonging across difference is the song our ancestors sang in the wilderness, and it is the charge placed in all of our hands today. And though the road before us is windy and complex, and though we may stumble through misunderstanding and fear, we must keep moving. Because the dream of a just, loving, inclusive Jewish future is not because of our homogeneity of ideas, but because of our ability to wonder as we wander through this labyrinth of a generation that has many fears and pharaohs. So let's continue to do this work together. Thank you so much. I'm passing it to my dear friend, mentor, and partner in crime, Rachel Gildiner.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you for your always beautiful words of Torah, Rabbi Isaiah. We are so grateful to be back together this morning and begin our morning re-emerging ourselves in stories of belonging. In this session, we are honored to welcome three extraordinary leaders, Rabbi Sandra Lawson, Rabbi Ayelet Cohen, and Dr. Mijal Bitton. Together, these leaders bring rich and intersecting identities and a wide range of experience, both navigating and also leading institutional and grassroots spaces. Each will share with us a personal story, a vignette that reveals something about what it has meant for them to seek, create, and hold space in Jewish communal life while also holding multiple identities. Each speaker will reflect on moments that they have felt seen, welcomed, excluded, invisible, or valued, and how they have navigated the complex, sometimes painful, sometimes beautiful work of belonging within the different communities that they inhabit. These are not easy stories to tell. They ask something of the speaker, and they also ask something of us, the listeners. They ask us to stretch, to reflect, and perhaps to sit with perspectives that do not match our own. As we have said since yesterday and through our time together, there is no single story of belonging. Instead, it is a mosaic, layered, imperfect, and deeply, deeply human. You may hear something in their stories that surprises you. You may hear something that challenges the way you think about Jewish community or varies from your own personal lived experience. But this session is a very invitation to deeply listen across lines of difference and complexity. There is no single story of belonging. You may not agree or fully understand every perspective that's shared today, or perhaps that you've even heard from one another. And that's the heart of this work. Belonging asks us to hold space for one another's truths, even when they challenge us. We are very grateful to our speakers for their honesty, leadership, and to everyone in this room for being a part of this conversation and modeling that we can do this. Following the reflections, we will engage in a conversation with each speaker and open the floor to questions from the audience. If you notice at your table, there should be cards and pens. We invite you, as you are listening to the speakers, to write your questions. And once our speakers are done, we will have staff collect those cards, and we will try and incorporate as many questions as we can into the discussion part of the session. So with that, please join me in welcoming Rabbi Sandra Lawson, Rabbi Ayelet Cohen, and Dr. Mijal Bitton.
Thank you. They raise their glasses and say my name. Call me progress and then call me change. And they put my face up on the stage, but never in the house they made. 'Cause they want my voice, but not my truth. They call me family and then call me friend and then shut the door when I won't bend. Oh, they love the way I pray today, but they don't know the price I pay. I ain't dressed in borrowed skin, no. I ain't whitewashed and won't cave in, and I walk this road and I hold my ground, but they want me small and bound. 'Cause they want my voice, but not my truth. They call me family and then call me friend, and then shut the door when I won't bend. Oh, they love the way I pray today, but they don't know the price I pay. I won't fade, I won't change. I won't trade my name for fame, and I am here and I stand alone, but my song is mine to own. They want my voice, but not my truth. They call me family and then call me friend, and they shut the door when I won't bend. Oh, they love the way I pray today, but they don't know the price I pay. I am fire and I am free, and I am more than what you see. Thank you all for having me today. Thank you. Thank you. I was telling Rabbi Amber Powers that I felt really naked up here singing a song I just wrote with no guitar in hand, so that means a lot. We're going to talk about belonging. I love being Jewish. I love being a rabbi, and when I look at the 3 smartest decisions I ever made in my life in chronological order: joining the military, marrying my wife, Susan, and becoming a rabbi. Each of those choices has shaped me, challenged me, and pushed me to grow into the fullness of who I am. I became a rabbi because I came from a Jewish community that nourished me, loved me, but stepping into rabbinic leadership was different. Many of those same people in subtle and not so subtle ways let me know very clearly that they weren't ready for a rabbi that looked like me. No matter what I've accomplished, there are still those who struggle to see me as Jewish and to see me as a rabbi. The song I just sang for you, I wrote a few weeks ago. And sometimes it is easier for me to express complicated feelings and emotions through songs, because I understand that sometimes songs, it's often, people often, with songs, it opens their heart and moves them out of their headspace. That song comes from a place of longing, resilience, frustration, sometimes grief, and also joy. There have been many, many moments when I felt like I didn't fully belong in Jewish spaces. And here's something I want you all to understand, that most communities I encounter believe and see themselves as welcoming, but the reality is they will say, come in, we welcome you, but they cling tightly to their own definitions of who counts and who fits and who gets to shape the community. Every time I walk into a Jewish space, I'm carrying the weight of assumptions about who is Jewish, assumptions about who was about Black people, assumptions about rabbis, and these assumptions often come from stereotypes, media, inherited biases, and centuries of stories that have shaped how people see the world. And many people who are not Black project onto me their own ideas about what Blackness means. And they project what kind of person I must be, and layered on top of that, they carry narrow expectations about what it means to be Jewish. I don't fit neatly into their boxes or their categories or definitions, and over I am asked to explain or justify to people I don't even know how I am Jewish, or why I'm here, or how I'm here, or how I belong. But here's what belonging should mean. It should mean that you don't have to explain or justify your existence. If someone is Jewish, that should be enough, and yet in many Jewish spaces, at least for me and for others, it's still not enough. I have devoted my entire career to helping the Jewish community see the full, rich tapestry of who we are, the beautiful, complicated, diverse, messy, real stories that make up American Judaism today. Because when we make room for people to bring their whole selves, we don't just expand who we are, we become more honest and more compassionate and more whole. Belonging feels like home, or at least it should feel like home. And it also feels like I can stand here and be all of me and sing a song that y'all have never heard before. And my presence doesn't just stretch the space, or my presence doesn't just make the space stretch thin, it makes it deeper, stronger, and truer. And I believe with my whole heart that we are all called to create communities where no one has to trade away parts of themselves to belong, where we don't just welcome people, we let them reshape, we let people enrich, and we let people transform our spaces alongside us.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for being here. And thank you so much to Rachel and Shana and all of SRE for creating this space for all of us and for creating the opportunity for me to be here with two incredible, smart, strong women and share this stage in real conversation. I grew up deeply in Jewish community. And I start there because as I've moved through my life and considered questions of belonging and authenticity and privilege, I know that I start from a place where I believe I belong, because my Jewish family was filled with love and support and learning and Yiddishkeit and prayer and song. My parents were part of the Chavurah movement, creating traditional egalitarian communities that they were deeply a part of, where we were empowered to be full and engaged members, creating what we needed for our family, for our Jewish life, for our spiritual life, that filled us deeply. I grew up in a family that was deeply connected to Israel. My father, of blessed memory, devoted his life to the pursuit of peace between Arabs and Israelis. And on a personal level, we were so deeply connected and are so deeply connected to our family in Israel. That was part of who we are every day and informed the sense of belonging that animates me. I remember very clearly sitting in shul on the high holidays and hearing that the conservative movement was going to begin ordaining women. I was middle school age and I was confused because in our Chavurah, we were fully egalitarian. Women led everything, counted in minyan, were deeply ingrained in the spiritual and practical leadership of the community. And I understood simultaneously that this was a really big deal. And also I didn't totally understand what had taken so long for that movement to get there. I came of age as a young adult, going to college, having for the first time the opportunity to help create my own Jewish community, not just the community I had inherited from my parents, and that was created really for us, for my sisters and me and our peers by our parents who worried about how we would fully inhabit our Jewish life. And so there I was in the early 90s in a Jewish community that I actually got to help create at a time when the Reform movement decided for the very first time to ordain openly gay and lesbian rabbis at the Hebrew Union College. And the conservative movement decided not to do so, to study the issue, and made the decision that the Jewish Theological Seminary, the conservative movement, would not ordain openly gay and lesbian students as rabbis. Now, we of course all knew, even then, that there had been gay and lesbian rabbis for a long time who were not allowed, or who were not able to be out, who were not able to be open in the fullness of themselves. That coinciding of the law committee of the conservative movement making that decision, of JTS doubling down on that decision not to ordain openly gay and lesbian students as rabbis, came at the same time, as I said, as I was for the first time in a position of Jewish communal leadership in my own Hillel community, and at a time when my own sister had recently come out as a lesbian and discovered another surprise, that our very progressive community was struggling. I thought we were raised to be open, to be supportive, to be feminists, to be supportive of LGBT rights. And then, when it came to the own intimacy of our community, it was suddenly a very big deal. And a lot of people really, really struggled. And I remember as a young adult feeling that betrayal, that disappointment, that pain, and feeling like, okay, it's time for our generation to move this forward. And just as we were always taught that the students could be the teachers, this was a moment where we had a responsibility to take the values that we were taught about creating communities that met our spiritual and communal needs and keep opening them wider. And so I had the great joy in my college community at the time of a lot of communal turmoil to be making decisions to say, I don't want the door to be just open wide enough to let me in. It's also my responsibility and my privilege and my joy to make sure that it's open wider. And so we in our Hillel community were one of the first Hillels to say, we are going to be a community that is fully open and embracing of LGBT people. Or I guess at the time it was LGB people, we were just learning, to open the door further. I was really blessed to be part of a community of other student activists in college, to have the leadership of Rabbi Alan Flam, who was the leader of our Brown University Hillel, who really wanted to encourage us to grow in leadership and be who we wanted to be. And so as I grew in my own decisions to become a rabbi, I decided that I wanted to study at the Jewish Theological Seminary, which for me was a moment of both acknowledging the importance of changing from within and the power of shifting the center. What does it mean to shift the center so that the assumptions that are made by the majority of a community change profoundly? For me, when I made the decision to study there, it was part of the decision to help move the movement, to open the door wider. I knew very well that I was there as a woman because of work that had happened a generation before me, and that it was my responsibility to do that work for the next generation, to acknowledge those who had done the work to make my presence possible, and to do the work for the next step. When I began my career at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, learning under Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, who had been leading that community already for a decade, a community which since 1973 had been speaking one person to another face to face to insist on the humanity of LGBT people and the need for the Jewish community to expand and acknowledge and grow and celebrate its full reality. I learned how important it is to acknowledge one's privilege and to use one's privilege to move the conversation forward. As a person who doesn't question my own belonging in Jewish spaces and Jewish community, it is my responsibility to use that to open Jewish community wider, to honor those who have done the work to get us here. I'm now the dean of the rabbinical school at JTS. To be in the leadership of a legacy organization, which includes rich history and debates and mistakes, which includes the legacy of Solomon Schechter and Henrietta Zold and Mordechai Kaplan and Abraham Joshua Heschel. We need to be able to own that history, to acknowledge their learning, and to acknowledge the mistakes that were made. that Henrietta Zold was allowed to pursue study at JTS because she swore that she would not pursue rabbinical ordination, that Abraham Joshua Heschel, in his tremendous leadership, was not appreciated for his opposition to the Vietnam War, for his insistence on the Jewish community working hard in partnership with the civil rights movement. To hold the legacy is to honor both the rich history and not to paper over what was done wrong so that we can move forward in the fullness. And that remains true. We are in a time right now of tremendous upheaval in American democracy, in the relationship with Israel. As someone who has never questioned my own connection to Jewish community, my own deep connection and responsibility to Israel, I too have been targeted often. First, when I was a very, very young rabbi, I was nearly thrown out of the rabbinical assembly because it hadn't occurred to anyone that as an ally, we can have tremendous power to move the conversation forward. That policies that keep out individuals, a policy that denies ordination to LGBT people, could be intended to keep that conversation quiet. But as allies, we have the opportunity to say, I'm in, and I'm moving this conversation forward. And often, people aren't prepared for that, and that's where we can do change. So we all have the opportunity to think about, where do we hold privilege? Where do we deeply belong? And what is our responsibility as allies to others to make sure we are opening the door further? And in this moment, we need to think about, who are we keeping in, who are we keeping out? When I first ascended to the role of Dean of JTS, the opposition around me actually had nothing to do with my history of work on LGBT equality in the movement, because it was so long ago, it's taken for granted now, nobody thinks about it. Everybody thinks that's just how it is now. It was actually because I'm on record opposing the occupation, I'm on record in progressive Israel communities. And so that was used as an argument against my fitness for this role. And again, this is a place where I say, I know I belong. When I hear arguments like that, I worry less about my own Zionism, which I know is strong, and more about our Jewish community and whether we have the capacity to really hold complexity. We need to use words like belonging in their deepest, most complex senses, not to paper over those differences, to really ask ourselves, how wide is the door that we are opening? How deep are the conversations that we are having? How can we use the responsibility of our own belonging, of our own privilege, to build communities that can hold the difficult conversations, hold the mistakes we have made, and still lift up the voices of all of those who have come before us, all of those now, and all of those who are yet to come, who will create change and help heal what is so broken in our world. Thank you.
Wow. I'd just like to ask us all to give another round of applause to these brave and amazing women. I want to thank you again for sharing your stories with us, each so beautiful, each so different, each with so many commonalities that I hope we'll get a chance to explore this together. And also, I truly believe, and I think part of our intention of creating this space this morning, is that just hearing one another's stories can be a real act of tikkun, of repair, of healing. I know I felt really a healing in hearing your experiences and really giving us the opportunity to fully, deeply see each one of you and your ancestors and your histories. And so thank you for letting this room be a part of that tikkun. We have so many questions for you, some of which will be coming to me soon from the audience. But what I want to start with, what I noticed, it wasn't even a question we planned for, but what I heard in each of your narratives is this deep role of love. Each one of you spoke in different ways about the homes you came from, the love that you felt, the support, the belonging that you experienced in order to share your gifts with the world. And I just want to ask you each to talk a little bit more about what it felt to experience that love and what role that really played in your sense of belonging today. Whoever wants to begin.
It's interesting, your question, because I really did come from a wonderful community that has almost everything to do with why I'm on this stage right now, how people know me. And I have been nurtured in all the ways that rabbis are nurtured. I went to a wonderful rabbinical school. My admissions director, who's now the executive vice president of Reconstructing Judaism, is here. I have great relationships with rabbis and other members of the Jewish community. And the inability for members of our community to hold complexity, which you were talking about, and understand the vast diversity of the Jewish people. I mean, intellectually, I think American Jews understand that Jews are multiracial or black, brown, but there's another layer in there that doesn't allow sadly, for many in the Jewish community who present as white to understand that we all don't have the same narratives, that the American Jewish community is becoming more diverse the longer that we live in the United States, which means you're going to see more rabbis like me. You're going to see more Jewish leadership that looks like me. When I was ordained, it wouldn't be uncommon for me to come into a place to be the only black rabbi. That's not the case anymore, which is awesome. But it's interesting to love and be in love with the people who often don't return that or don't understand how what they're doing is or don't understand their own biases. Let me stop there.
I mean, I think I would say, coming from my family and from my community, I always knew there were people who had my back, and there were people who were on my side no matter what, and that gave me a tremendous amount of strength and the ability to navigate some of the harder things that came later. So when I was, brand new into my rabbinate, I was, 26, 27 years old, and these men in positions of power were saying, how dare you ask for what you're asking for, which comes from misogyny, which comes from fear of change, which comes from this sense of, who do you think you are, you little girl, that you can tell us that we need to change what we've been doing the same way for so long. But knowing that you have people who have your back, who believe in you, can really give you strength to move forward and also make you realize I need to be that for other people. So when I became a rabbi at CBST, I was, as a straight, white, cis woman, I had to work to put myself in rooms where I was the only straight person in the room. And I spent 10 years as a rabbi in a community where it wasn't uncommon for me to be the only straight person in a room, which is not an experience that a lot of straight people have ever had. And I highly encourage people who are in whatever majority category we happen to be in to seek out those experiences, because you learn a lot by listening, by realizing this is not my time to hold a lot of attention, but actually to listen to others, and to realize what I need to learn about how to show up for other people. And I think if I wasn't loved and supported, I wouldn't have learned to develop that instinct to do that for other people.
Thank you.
Rachel, I found the question a hard one.
Yeah.
It's a hard one. As I was going up, actually, I was thinking, I've wondered for years why I loved my grandmother so much, like really trying to understand myself. And I think some of it is because I haven't experienced that with everyone in my family and everyone I love, even till today. I would say that the majority of the spaces I'm in, I experience simultaneous belonging and not belonging at the same time. And it's something that I have accepted as the kind of like condition for choosing to live a life of commitment to a lot of people that disagree with me profoundly. So on pretty much a daily basis, if you want to open my family WhatsApp chat, there's but I actually, even with the fact that it's not always easy, I do feel that I am grateful for it. I didn't choose, my journey. Some of it I did, but some of it I didn't. And I think it's asked from me to consider this kind of work. And especially now with rising polarization all across America. I would say right now, in terms of the political environment I'm in, 1/3 of my life is very red, 1/3 is very blue, and 1/3 is like either purple or apathetic or independent, whatever you want to choose. And I feel that it's really, really hard if you want to continue being with all those spaces. And my family, in a sense, has been a training ground for that. So, yeah.
Can I say something?
Please.
I think what's interesting about this is that all of us, and for me, I'm sure many other people, if you sit on the margins in some capacity, you have the ability to hold complexity. But if you don't have that and you, let's just say like a cisgendered white male, or other folks who hold privilege in our community aren't able to hold that complexity. I live in a purple state in a red community, and my neighbors take care of us. And we're interracial Jewish family. I'm the only, I know I'm the only rabbi they know, and I know I'm most likely the only Jew they know, but I love my neighbors. But I think the ability to hold complexity and having more leaders that can do that gives me hope for bringing people into our communities and holding the tension.
Yeah, but if I may, I do think, and I want to do this because I think it's good to name the fact that amongst us we have different journeys and we might see things a little bit differently.
Of course. Yeah.
I think that marginality can have to do with a lot of different experiences. Sometimes it's about race or gender, sometimes it's around like class, migration, education, and where you come from. And I think that's some of the difficult conversations that we need to be having right now in terms of belonging, about what does it mean to be at the margins, what disagreements we might actually have about what the margins are and what the center is, and what it means to have Jewish leadership that is thinking about the work that we're doing, sometimes in a similar way and sometimes in a way that is different.
Thank you for modeling that and being in conversation about that. One of the things that I think all of us in this room work in every day or are thinking about, to your point, Mijal, is, and I'll just share personally what I have experienced over these last few days. I have made judgments about people based on physical appearance because I am a human, but only after hearing stories of where they came from, where their ancestors came from, loss that they experienced later in their life, fertility loss. There are so many invisible elements that can make each of us feel outside of community, and we will never know unless we truly see them, spend time with them, are in relationship with them, understand them. And I do think what has come up for so many of us is that that is just lacking in our community today. It's a skill that feels harder to exercise. It's a muscle that's like atrophying both in our country and in our communities. And so I just appreciate the kind of call, invitation, and reminder that that is also part of the work, is to sit with people across difference and be able to hear and talk and think differently, but be together. And just thank you.
And I think also that having achieved some progress doesn't mean we're done.
Right, yeah.
That there's I think a very natural desire to feel like, oh, look what we solved. Like now we have women in the rabbinical school. Now we have LGBT people in the rabbinical school. It's so great. We solved that, it's all done. But there's a lot of coasting that happens to say, okay, we don't really have to examine what do we really need to do to make that change significant. So I went to rabbinical school in kind of the second generation of women, and we didn't have any faculty who were women. A lot of our faculty had voted against the admission of women. Every day I heard people who said, we don't think you should be here. We think your presence here is ruining everything. Now we have this incredible population of rabbinical students coming out of all of the seminaries who are much more reflective of the diversity of the Jewish world. More Jews by choice, more Jews of color, more Jews of different gender expression and experience all over the political spectrum, and that's great. And are there jobs for them? Are there communities that are ready to say, we would happily have a transgender rabbi lead our community? We would happily have a Jew by choice lead our community. We see across the spectrum that there's a big gap between this sort of self-satisfaction of, oh, we've made all of this change, and actually being willing to inhabit that change. And especially when we're in a political moment in this country where that change is being clawed back, and we can't take anything for granted.
Yes. One of the things that I, from our conversation last night with Edith and Paul, we heard it from Eric in our opening, and that I'm hearing from each of you too, is this desire when you hold multiple identities to deserve to be fully seen, have that sense of belonging. You shouldn't have to fight for it. And in many of the communities that we work in, I think, Mijal, you're even with your family, your example you're giving of us, there's also an element of meeting people where they are. And sometimes that can be painful because we feel maybe farther. But this idea of building coalition, meeting people where they are, going at the speed of relationship and trust. Can you just talk a little bit about how that has emerged for you in both your existence and in your leadership with your communities?
Yeah, I think some of the work is meeting people where they are, but I want to offer an additional framework. And I'll speak frankly. I think that in the last few years, not only in the Jewish community, but in many spaces, a lot of the work that had to do with inclusion, with diversity, with belonging, with expanding who's in, has been predicated on alignment with progressive politics. I'm just going to name that. And there's been a certain vision that this work needs to come hand in hand and needs to have a vision of progress, of the arc bending towards justice in a way that is in alignment with that. So to me, it's not that I want to meet people where they are, in the sense that if they're not progressive, I will get to know them, meet them, and try to move them to my place. I am now in a place where I really believe we need to have a more pluralistic understanding of the good in society. It doesn't mean, like Rabbi Isaiah Rothstein said earlier, that there's no boundaries. I'm not a nihilist. I'm not advocating for that. But if we have a very narrow vision of what progress looks like, of what it means to have certain coalitions that are the good ones, of only certain votes that count, in the good team, and if that's the only place where we believe we want to do diversity work, or if diversity work is predicated on that, then it's going to remain pretty narrow work. And in my opinion, it's also going to become a stumbling block for work in terms of Jewish peoplehood and being able to work with each other. So part of what I'm advocating for something here, okay? And what I'm advocating for is, yes, meeting people where they are, getting to know why people are where they are, what's animating them in a genuine way, the most generous version of the person you disagree with. And then I would say expanding the way we think about diversity, expanding the way that we approach this work. I'm not asking anyone here to agree with me or to say, change your politics, or don't believe in something, or don't stand for something. But I do think that this moment and all of the challenges that we have seen across America in our communities, it asks us to reconsider and to ask, what assumptions have we been holding? How do they serve us in this moment? And how are we going to move forward?
I think you bring up a really important point around coalition work and how we need to be very aware of what it means to do coalition work in its complexity. You know, for many years in the US, we've seen these odd bedfellows of, for example, the Catholic Church and the Hasidic community in coalition against LGBT rights, against reproductive freedom. And there are a million things that those communities disagree with each other on and don't have in common, and yet those were issues that they were happy to work together on. On the other side, we need to think about how do we work together with people who we are not aligned with on every issue. How does it feel to be in relationship with people, to see their humanity, to appreciate our neighbors, even though we might be very, very different from them and vote very differently from them? Where are the places in which we can work together to make our world better without having to hide who we are, without having to apologize for what we believe in, and still make progress? I think we need to be really careful about distancing ourselves from whole movements, because there are voices within those movements who are problematic or difficult or discriminatory, and to figure out how do we really distill the action that we need to create, the change we need to make on a hyper-local level, on a national level, to really make change. The lines are complicated and they often shift, and we have to figure out, is it about moral purity? Is it about making change? Is it about speaking out for justice? We really need to be asking ourselves those questions right now, because there's a lot at stake.
And I don't remember your question, but I'm going to.
No, please, this is the conversation.
I think one of the issues is, so like coalition work. So before I became a rabbi, I remember working on issues in Atlanta and having partnerships with evangelical Black ministers who thought I was going to hell either because I'm Jewish or I'm gay or whatever. But we came together on a particular issue. I have a relationship with a priest who is affirming, so we can work together on issues of LGBTQ stuff, but I can't work with him on abortion issues. But that's about coalition. And I think one of the other challenges is for many people in our society who have hold privilege, and however you want to define that, don't understand diversity. They don't understand what diversity actually means. So if I say diversity, a lot of people might assume that I'm talking about race. No, I'm talking about the vastness of diversity. There is so much less obvious diversity in this room right now that people just don't even think about or understand. And so part of the challenge is helping people understand what that means, who's in the room, and things are changing. You know, not that long ago in our society, certain people had access, had rights, had privilege, and that is changing. And for some people, that's uncomfortable. And as people try to learn, and people who don't have, who have never sat on the margins or who don't have diversity in their own lives, may see diversity as one thing, and part of the learning is helping them to understand that there's lots of diversity. There's race, there's gender, there's, you know, what you said before about children. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. So part of, I think, what should happen is helping people expand what that means.
Beautiful. And I think one of the calls of this gathering that we shared yesterday was the point of being here is we know we're coming in with perhaps predefined notions of what we mean by diversity, by inclusion, by belonging. And the call is for us to, in listening to one another, be able to expand those definitions and those mental models. So thank you each for your stories in helping us do that. We're at 0 time, but I want to ask one last question. I think we're hearing from a lot of our questions about what are some concrete ways that from your stories and from your beautiful narratives and vignettes, the folks in this room can take away. What do we as leaders need to be doing or thinking about to build belonging, to see one another's humanity, to honor agency and dignity in our communities? So if your parting words can be, what's one concrete way, tool, piece of advice that you have for us in the room today?
To echo your point, and I say this to people all the time, is we need to build relationships with people. We need to have conversations. I made a cute video not that long ago. It was a TikTok video. It was short and sweet, but I was like, take a black woman to coffee, or take somebody different and go have coffee, not to learn from their experiences, but to build a relationship with them across difference and just to talk and sit and have coffee.
Beautiful.
I just finished reading the book Abundance by Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein. Am I saying their names right? Anybody? Okay, great book. And one of the things that they bring up that's really resonated with me, because I've been thinking a lot about it in the context of this conversation, is that very often with very good intentions, we try to advance certain fixes without being honest about the costs that they have. It's almost like we pretend we are going to be able to include everybody and every point of view and everything, and it's all going to fit around one table. And we don't take a step back and say, actually, that is humanly impossible. That is socially impossible. There is always going to have to be like a cost, because any gathering is going to have some sort of boundaries. Any we is going to necessitate some sort of sense of where we are. So if I had like one very practical example, is to not be afraid to have the difficult conversations, to say, in this space, this is the diversity we're talking about. We are probably not going to be able to include the following. And we're going to be honest about that and about our principles. And we're going to be transparent about it. There's something to me that is very powerful about doing that, and that I think is much more constructive and useful than the pretense, right, or illusion maybe that we have, that kind of like everything can be reconciled. Not everything can be reconciled. Not everyone can be reconciled. And I think that there's something very responsible and even courageous about leadership at this moment, saying,